Okay, so we're picking up in the book of Ruth, Megillas Rus, towards the end of chapter 2, and Rus and Naomi have returned from Moab, poor, destitute, and Rus finds her way into the field of Boaz. Boaz welcomes her, is very impressed by her, and gives her permission to come back. You should keep coming back to my field, and treats her very well, and sends her back to Naomi with plenty that she collected herself for the most part, and also some leftovers from the meal that he invited her for, and that's where we pick up. Naomi greets her and asks her where she got everything, and she explains that it was from Boaz. And we're going to start from chapter 2, verse 20, Pasuk Chaf, where it says, Vatomer Naomi lekalasa, and Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, Baruch hu laHashem, blessed is he to God, asher lo azav chasto, that he has not abandoned his kindness, es hachayim ve'es hamesim, both for the living and the dead, meaning that that Boaz is not, he should be blessed by God because he has not abandoned his kindness. He's been kind both to the living and the dead, meaning, says the Malbim, that to the living, to us, to you and I, Naomi says that he wants to provide for us in an honorable way, and also to that this is also a chesed, a kindness to the departed. So here is where we actually, for the first time, are possibly introduced to the possibility of Yibum. And let's give a little introduction to what Yibum is and what it isn't. And from here on out, we're going to have to keep this possibility in mind and see what the commentaries say. So Yibum is discussed in Parshas Kiseitse, book of Devarim, chapter 25. And there it says that if there are two brothers living at the same time and one of them dies without children, so his wife does not just become a widow straight up, but rather she becomes someone who is in this kind of no man's land or no woman's land of zakuk liyibum, we say. She's fit for yibum. Now yibum means that one of the other brothers of this man who of her husband who died can marry her. And the way the Torah describes it is that Yevama Yavo Aleha, one of the brothers, her brothers-in-law, will have relations with her and take her as a wife, and their firstborn child will stand in the place of the departed brother who has passed, and his name won't be wiped out. So it's a way of perpetuating the departed's neshama, his soul, or something like that. It's described as just, it will be uphold his name, and that's the option of Yibum. Yibum doesn't have kiddushin like a normal marriage. Kiddushin, usually for a marriage, a man gives a woman kiddushin to sort of acquire her, and then that's followed by a second step of nisuin, where either they seclude themselves or through relations, and that's by normal marriage. Yibum is done just there's no kiddushin. It's just done through having marital relations, and midrabanan, rabbinic law, requires some kind of kiddushin like thing called maimer, but by Torah law it does not, and that's Yibum. Now, if the brother doesn't want to do Yibum, then they go through the process called Chalitza. The Torah goes on and says if he doesn't want to marry her, or if none of the brothers want to marry her, so then they do Chalitza. Chalitza is a process where the woman will remove the shoe of the brother, one of the brothers, and then she'll spit on the ground, and then there's certain words that they say, declarations, and then she's out, and then she can marry somebody else if she wishes. And that's the process of chalitza, a very interesting process, which we'll actually explain a little bit soon what it's about. So those are kind of that's the background to Yibum. Now, Yibum is only normally done by a brother. By Torah law, it's only if a man dies without children and he has a brother, so then the brother could do Yibum. Now here, Ruth was married and her husband died. They didn't have any children, and it's possible actually there was another brother. There was Machlon and Kilion. I don't actually remember which one Ruth was married to, but whichever one she was married to died first, and then it's possible the second one did Yibum, but he died anyways, and now there's no more brothers. So the Torah's version of Yibum is not really relevant over here. However, the concept of Yibum, the idea, may still be applicable, and therefore some commentaries understand that what is about to unfold in the book of Ruth has very much certainly the undertones of Yibum, maybe even is some, it's again, it's not the Torah's version of it, but it's related. It's in the spirit of Yibum, we might say. So over here, when Naomi says that he's done kindness with the living and the dead, so the Malbim says that Naomi sensed that Boaz intended already, the way he treated Ruth here, that he might intend to actually do this Yibum process, marry Ruth, and that would be a kindness to the departed, and that will perpetuate the name of her husband through this, again, either through having children, or we'll see another possibility of what it might be about. So and then she continues, and he says, "Vatomer la Naomi," and then Naomi says, "Karov lanu ha'ish migoaleinu." He is our relative, and he is from our redeemers. Migoaleinu. He is one of our potential redeemers, and this is also going to be an important word, and very somewhat enigmatic exactly what's going on from here on out. With this idea of a goel, of a redeemer. It's going to be, this basically the whole next chapter is going to revolve around this concept of Yibum and there being a goel, a redeemer, and what it's really about. The Ibn Ezra in his commentary here says that it's not talking about Yibum. Just so you should know, it's not Yibum. It's something else. It doesn't really elaborate too much. The concept of a goel really came up in this past week's parsha, in Parshas Bahar, where it's a number of different situations, but the general concept is that if a person falls on hard times and has to sell their property, then there are different opportunities to redeem that property, sort of to buy it back. So for example, the Torah says that if a person sells their field, so it's not explicit, but basically, if you sell a field, the first 2 years you're not allowed to buy it back. After 2 years, then you or a family member can buy it back. If you don't, it's going to come back anyways at the Yovel year, at the Jubilee year. So the Torah, the land of Israel was divided up between the tribes, and to each family, everybody has their stei achusa, their place of inheritance, their family's land. And if you sell a field, it's really a long-term lease or short-term lease, depending on how many years are left till Yovel, and you'll get it back then. But even before that, so if you sell a field, you can't buy it back the first 2 years, but after that, you have the right to basically, if you pay the right value for it, you can force the buyer to sell it back to you, because really it's your property, it's your family's property. So it's possible that that's what we're dealing with here. The concept of a goel has to do with redeeming the property of Rus and her family. And that's how actually one of the commentaries, Rabbi Yosef Karo, explains it, that he was the uncle of the author of the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Karo. but the commentary on, I think he was the uncle or something like that. It's not the same Rabbi Yosef Karo of the Shulchan Aruch though. He has a commentary on throughout the Nevi'im, the prophets, and he says that actually they had sold their fields before they left to Moab, and the Elimelech and the family, and now they were looking for a way to get those fields back. They didn't have any money. They needed help from the family to redeem those fields and get them back. That's how he learns. Because again, you can't do it within the first 2 years. So, but now it would have been many years since it was sold, and then so they would be allowed to do it. But we're gonna mostly go with an approach that actually we're not talking about a field that has been sold, but rather that they are in need to sell. So they come back, they still own land, but they need money, and therefore they need to sell their fields, and who are they going to sell it to? So the best people to sell it to, and actually first rights, would go to the family. And this is what the Ramban writes in his commentary in this past week's parsha, in Parshas Bahar, that when there's a need to sell a field, so we ideally want it to stay within the family, and therefore the one who has the first rights to buy it would be the next in inheritance, the next to inherit. The next of kin, and so therefore that's going to be who's the next person to inherit, who's the closest family member. That's the person who's going to have the right to buy this field, the fields of Naomi and Rus, and that's who they're going to go to. And Boaz, it turns out, is one of the Goalim. He's one of the redeemers, but as we'll see, he's not first in line, and that's going to play an important role. He's not the first in line, and therefore they're going to have to go to someone else first to see if he'll redeem the field, and he'll buy it from them before Boaz has that opportunity. Robert.
Yeah, I guess I'm just wrong, but I thought that the person who had the first right to buy the property was somebody who owned the neighboring property.
So there is such a halacha, bar matzra it's called, and I don't know. Obviously, the Ramban, when he talks about this, he does invoke that as a similar example. The way the Ramban says it is that nireh be'enai, it appears to me that they would give him first rights, just like the rabbis did by Dina de Bar Matzah, which is what you're referring to, which is that the neighboring field. So it could be that's a rabbinic. Neither of these are Torah law. Dina de Bar Matzah, the idea that a neighbor would have the first right to buy is rabbinic law, and perhaps later enacted later. And at this time, the way that again, this isn't necessarily halacha, ruled on in Gemara and Shulchan Aruch, but this was the practice of those days, was that the first rights would go to the one who's supposed to inherit it next. So they would have the first right to buy it. Okay, a little bit of introduction, but it's important as we go because it's going to keep coming up, all these concepts. Okay, so just to conclude the chapter, so verse 21, so Ruth the Moabite said, Gam ki amar elai im hanarim asher li tidbakin adim kilu eis klakatzir asher li. He also told me that I can continue to be and collect with all of the lads, and actually the Malbim says that she thought that Boaz was telling her to collect with the men, to go near the men, and she thought that Boaz wanted her to meet a nice young man amongst the collectors, and that's why she says that he said, Amar elai im hane'arim, with the male lads, I should cleave, I should be around, and in fact, though, that's not what Boaz had told her. Boaz had told her to go with the girls, and right. So in the translation, it says, "You shall stay with my youths until they finish my entire harvest." You could keep, for throughout the harvest, you can stay with the youths. And Naomi says back to her, In 22, Vatomer Naomi El Rus Kalasa to Rus, her daughter-in-law, Tobi Tiki Setim Na Arosav. It's better that you go with the girls, with the maidens, and so they don't touch you in a different field. Basically, though, but the way the Malim says, like, is no, the intent was that you should remain with the maidens and not with the boys, and that will where you'll be safer also, and that's what she does. The chapter concludes Vatidbak b'na'aros Boaz. So she remained with the maidens to continue to collect until the end of the harvest, the barley harvest and the wheat harvest. And then she remained with her mother-in-law. Again, a testament to her devotion, even though she had probably made lots of friends amongst the maidens, and she might have preferred to spend time with the maidens. But once the harvest was over, so she remained with her mother-in-law. And that is how chapter 2 concludes. Okay, chapter 3, Perek Gimel. So a short time has passed. The commentaries say 3 months have passed. The significance of 3 months is that it's been 3 months since her conversion. If she had had relations with anyone before she converted, there would and now if she would marry someone, there would be no question as to who the father is at this point, whether it was whether it was conceived before the conversion or after. Now she could get married, and if she would have a baby, it would be clear if it was conceived before or after a conversion. So now time has passed. Vatomer la Naomi chamosa, and Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, Biti, my daughter, I want to find you rest and peace that will be good for you, meaning a husband who will ensure your safe future. And I have a great idea. How about Boaz? Vata, and now hello, Boaz modatanu. Boaz, our relative, Asher Hayisas Narasav, that you have been around his maidens. He is tonight. He is winnowing by the granary of barley this evening. So what the next series of verses are surprising, and we're going to read them a series of verses, and then for a little while here. And verse 3 says, you should wash yourself, anoint yourself, dress up in your finest clothes, go down to the threshing floor of the granary, and don't let yourself be known to the man, to Boaz, until he's finished eating and drinking and he's in good spirits. And when he goes to lie down, you should take note of where he goes to lie down. Uvas, you should come, you should reveal his feet, and lie down there. And he will tell you what it is that you're supposed to do. Okay, those are the instructions from Naomi to Ruth. Go and see where he goes to lie down, uncover his feet, and then he'll tell you what to do. She's like, okay, whatever you say, I will do. So she went down to the threshing floor. So she did exactly like her mother-in-law had commanded her. Boaz ate, he drank, his heart was in good spirits, and he came to lie down by the edge of the stacks, and she came very quietly, she revealed his feet, and she lay down there. And it was in the middle of the night. Suddenly he became frightened. He realized somebody was there. And here they translate the man quaked. Sorry, no, that was Vayacharad. Okay, we'll see different explanations. It could be that she covered his mouth. There was a woman lying by his feet. And he said, who are you? And she said, I am Ruth, your maidservant. You should spread your so here they translate it, your skirt over your handmaid, meaning his robe. You should spread your robe over your handmaid because you are a goel. The translation here from Chabad.com is you are a near kinsman, but it's this idea, this goel that we've been talking about, this redeemer. You are a redeemer.
Yeah,
okay, so
ArtScroll has redeemer.
What?
ArtScroll translated as redeemer.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's pause there and try to figure out what's going on. Boaz is not going to they're not going to have relations here. He's gonna, if that's even what she was looking for. But so we'll see in a moment. But he's gonna say, nothing can happen right now. But let's try to figure out what is this all about? What is she trying to do? So okay, so first of all, Boaz is out in the field. Rashi says because there were thieves, he wanted to sleep by his grain to make sure nobody stole it. And the instructions were very careful, to be unassuming. You're known there. It's okay that you're there. Nobody's going to be surprised that you're there. He's as it says in verse 2, he is our relative. You've been around. It won't be surprising that you're there. So just hang out and wait for things to quiet down before you make your move. She tells her to dress up in her finest. Commentaries say what she was really saying was take along your fine clothes and put them on once the coast is clear, but don't dress in them. If you show up in your your finest clothes, like when everybody's harvesting, that's going to be that's going to be a red flag. But rather come in your regular clothes, but you should have them with you so that you can change. Okay, now what was the goal here? So there's kind of two approaches that we could take. One is the Malbim, who talks a lot about Yibum, and one is kind of the other way to say that we're not dealing with the Yibum here, but with something else. So let's begin with the Malbim. So we introduced the concept of Yibum. We said Yibum is really done by a brother, but this might be in the spirit of Yibum. And the Malbim explains that that's what they were after. They wanted Boaz to do Yibum. As I mentioned, Yibum is normally done just with marital relations. That's how Yibum is done. It's accomplished. It's consummated just through marital relations. This isn't really Yibum because he's not a brother. Seemingly, that it wouldn't follow the same laws of Yibum. The truth is, though, the Malbim doesn't speak this out, but the truth is that even Kiddushin, so Kiddushin, which is the betrothal, which is really a beginning of a marriage, there's really three ways Kiddushin could be done. Nowadays, we always do it with a ring. A ring is just the equivalent of money, so the first way is with money or something of value. The second way is through a document, a shtar, a contract. The third way is through bia, through marital relations. And although that is very discouraged in halacha, and even actually forbidden by the rabbis to do kiddushin, to do a betrothal through marital relations, but it is effective. It does work, and it could be that that's what Ruth was after. That she wanted Boaz to marry her, and he could even be mekadesh her. He could betroth her through marital relations. But what she was after was the concept of Yibum, and that's why she was told, says Naomi, to uncover his shoes. Because as we mentioned, chalitza, Tom covers feet. Chalitza, when a man chooses not to do yibum, then the woman will remove his shoe. So what's the idea of removing the shoe? So the Malbim says that the idea is that based on the Kabbalists, that in a certain sense, everybody's body is like a shoe for their neshama. The neshama really is, we have like a bit of it in our body, but it goes up to spiritual worlds, well above us. And there's a little bit that maybe the sparks of it, different aspects, that's a whole topic in itself, that enter the body. The shoe is like the body is like the body is like the shoe of the neshama, of the soul, and it's needed. The soul can't function in this world without its shoe, without its body on. And now when a person dies and he has no children, so he hasn't left a legacy of offspring. So his neshama, his soul, wants to be perpetuated somehow. And a way to do that is through yibum. Yibum will, on some level, perpetuate the soul of the departed. Now, if a man decides that he doesn't want to do yibum, so what he's basically saying is, I'm not going to perpetuate the soul. I'm not going to give that soul a new body in this world to exist, and so I'm not giving the soul a new shoe. And so the symbolism of that is he's going to have his shoe removed. That shows you're not willing to give the soul a shoe in this world, a new body in this world. That's the concept. And so that's in general chalitza. So here Naomi sends Ruth, go uncover the feet of Boaz, indicating like, if you don't marry me, then it's like we're going through chalitza. It's like you're not willing to perpetuate the soul of the departed. And that was her way of hinting really to him that he should do yibum and he should marry her. Again, not the classic yibum, but that's concept of a similar idea in the spirit of yibum, of perpetuating the soul of the departed. So that was the message that she was trying to send, and it seems that she wanted him to marry her, and that's what she was after. That is the way the Malbim explains it. The other way to explain it, which is how Rashi seems to go. So if you look in verse 10, so verse 9, that's really where Ruth requests that he marry her. She says, "You should spread your robe over me," and what she was telling him is, "You should marry me. You should maybe like a chuppah. You should marry me." And what was he trying to do? What was she trying to do? What was this idea? So according to Rashi, what she was saying, and why was she saying you are a goel, you are a redeemer in verse 9? So Rashi says that, like we said before, there's this concept that if you have to sell your property, so you first go to the relatives, and when a relative buys the field, if he also marries the woman who has no children, so every time people think about the field, they'll kind of remember where it came from, because it's still associated with this, since he also married the wife of the departed. So there's this association of the field and the property and the woman with the departed, and that will perpetuate the memory of the departed. He'll be remembered kind of in this dual way of they purchased his property and his wife comes and goes from it, or his previous wife, now she's married to the new person, but she comes and goes, and that way the deceased will be remembered. That's a certain way to perpetuate his memory. And that's another type of upholding, of maintaining the name of the person who passed. And that's what she was going after. So she wanted, again, according to this, she wanted him to marry her and to redeem the fields, and that would perpetuate the memory of the of her departed husband. It's still very strange, why the need to do it in this way? Why not just approach him and ask him? So the Malbim said, well, they were embarrassed. I don't know why this is better, but they didn't want to openly ask him. This was somehow a better way to do it. There is an idea which I have to mention, although it's a little shocking but worth mentioning, which appears in the Igeres Shmuel and other places. Igeres Shmuel, or Shmuel Duzida's commentary here, and he says that it had to be done in a way that was a little bit improprietous. And we find similarly, actually, you go back to where this all started anyway, Boaz's ancestor, Yehuda had relations with Tamar to produce, and again, she seduced him as a prostitute, and it's very strange that that's where the offspring of the tribe of Yehuda, the great, where ultimately Boaz descends from, and King David and Mashiach, and all this great offspring comes from just these very seemingly improper actions of first of Yehuda and Tamar, and now of Ruth and Boaz. And what the Igeres Shmuel says is that it had to be that way because we're dealing with David HaMelech, King David descending from them. We're dealing with Mashiach. We're dealing with the people who are going to alter the course of history for the Jewish people for the better. They're going to change the world. And the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, the Satan, is going to do everything in his power to stop it from happening, to prevent these events from unfolding. And therefore, he says, they had to trick the Yetzer Hara almost. They had to trick the Satan and do it in a way that looked like something bad. And so in that the Satan would therefore let it go. Only through an act that looks bad could the Satan kind of let it go. It's almost like a carbon to the Satan. He invokes the idea of on Yom Kippur, we send one of the goats to the Azazel as like an offering to the Satan, the Satan. So this would prevent him from intervening. This way, he would just let it through, and only through that would they be able to produce ultimately the generations that would produce King David and eventually Mashiach. Okay, I think there's a lot of questions that can be asked about that. Namely, so that should be true every generation along the way. The Satan should be fighting tooth and nail every generation. Why just there? At Yehuda and Tamar and here. Okay, one question, probably other questions, but it's a fascinating idea. He's not the only one who says it, but it could be that's why it had to be done in this kind of improprietous way. Okay, Robert, you go first.
That's interesting because there's I think it's a midrash that there were questions about David's parentage also, and that's one of the reasons that when Shmuel came to Yishai to find which of his sons he was supposed to anoint, they had David out in the field with the sheep because they assumed it couldn't possibly be him, because even though there was not actually anything questionable about his parentage, there were rumors that there were, and so they figured that if he wouldn't pick somebody that had questions raised about him. And so again, it's the same idea that there wasn't actually anything wrong, but there was like a hint of impropriety about his parentage also.
Very interesting. Hi, Miriam.
Thank you, Rabbi. So listening to the beautiful imagery that you gave to kind of confuse the Satan, then I will go a little higher in the history and think about, because Yehuda came from Leah, right? And Leah wasn't supposed to be married to our father Yaakov. So she has to also be trick Yaakov in order to, so you can find some kind of those.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Thank you. Okay, so that's where we find ourselves. There's basically these two kind of dueling approaches as to what's going on here. Either it's a Yibum type of situation, that's the approach that the Malbim takes, or it's this idea of redeeming the property and marrying the wife of the departed, and that will perpetuate the memory of the deceased. Somebody else asked on the chat, why isn't Naomi then the one who's involved, perpetuating the memory of Elimelech? It's a fair question. It could be she was just too old at this point. That's what I would surmise. And but I'm not sure. Okay, so let's continue with verse 10. Actually, before we go on, I just want to mention one more thing. So in verse 9, so he says, you should, she says, Ruth says, you should spread your robe over me. So it's almost gives the imagery of like a chuppah, maybe a wedding canopy. The Malbim says that that she was knafecha can also mean a wing, and she was using an expression, you should put your wing over me. And he says that's what birds do when they mate, is they put their wing, the male, I guess, puts its wing over the female, and that's what she was alluding to. Okay, so verse 10 says, Boaz back, Vayomer brucha atla Hashem, may you be blessed before Hashem, Biti, my daughter, Hetavta chastecha acharon min harishon. Your latest chesed, your latest kindness is even greater than your first. That you're not chasing after the younger men, whether poor, whether rich. So what was the first chesed, the first kindness, and what's the last one? So the first one was that when she first married the son of Elimelech, again, I can't remember, it was Machlon or Kilion. So when you first married and you chose to marry amongst the Jewish people, and then fine, you married a young man. So fine, that's very nice, but he was young, and it's not not as impressive of a chesed because he was young. But this final chesed, this latest thing that you're doing, that you're willing to marry an older man, and clearly you're only doing it for l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven, to perpetuate your husband's name, and therefore it's a great chesed that you're willing to do that. And then he says, but it's not going to work yet, because he says, verse 11, Vata biti, now my daughter altiri kosher tomer yasela, everything I say I will do for you. Everybody knows that you are a valiant woman, and I'm willing to do it, but I can't just do it yet, because it's true, I am a goel, I am a relative, but there's another one who is closer, who would have first rights over me. Now, if he doesn't, she's saying in 11, don't be afraid, I'm going to do exactly what I say, meaning if the other redeemer does not come through, does not want to do it, then I will marry you, and I will redeem your property. But and don't worry that I'm going to be convinced out of it, because everybody knows that you are a valiant woman. But first we have to check with the closer relative. So he says, verse 13, Lini halayla, stay here for the night, vayava boker, and it will be in the morning, im yigalech tov, if he will redeem you, then great. V'imalo yachbotz ligalech, and if he doesn't want to, uge'altich anochi, I will redeem you. And in case she had any doubts, which the commentaries say she did, so then he said, she thought maybe he was just pushing her off, right? don't worry, I will in the morning. I'll do it if he doesn't do it. Right? Maybe he's just pushing her up. He says Chai Hashem, so he swears, and Chai Hashem, he swears, and he says remain here till morning. Vatishkav Margalosav. So she remained there. She laid there by his feet ad boker until the morning. Vatakam. And she got up before it was light, before anybody could recognize each other. Vayomer, and he said, don't tell anyone that she came here. Either he was talking to her, although the grammar sounds like he was talking to a man. So the Malbim says there was one of his servants there. He said to his servant, don't let anybody know that she was here. Vayomer, verse 15, and he said, Havi hamitpachas asher alayich. Bring me your shawl, v'chaziva, and hold it, v'tochaz ba, and she held it, v'yamad sheish sarim, and he measured out 6 barleys, v'yashes aleh v'yavo layir, and he placed it upon her. I guess it was a way of hiding it, and she came to the city. What is this idea of 6 barleys? So Rashi quotes a midrash. He was hinting to her that you're going to have offspring who has 6 great traits. The Malbim says that it doesn't mean 6. The word sheish is like a measurement. It was a 60th of a sa. A sa is a measurement. He gave her a 60th of one. What's the significance of that? Says the Malbim, it was 2 meals worth. Her breakfast and Naomi's breakfast. Why? What was he trying to tell her? He was trying to tell her that all I need to give you right now is breakfast, because by the evening, you'll be my wife. And we'll decide what's for dinner later. So that was what he was hinting to, by just giving her enough food for the morning. Vatavo al chamosa, and she came to her mother-in-law, Vatomer, and she said, Mi at biti. It was dark still. And she's like, who's there? Vatagedla esklasher asala haish. So she told her everything the man had done. Vatomer, and she said, Sheish asarim ha'eleh nasamli. She mentioned he gave me the 6th of a sa barley, according to the Malbim. He said, don't come empty-handed to your mother-in-law. And she understood. Naomi understood what was meant. So she says, Vatomer, and she said, Shivi v'ti ad asher teidin eich yipol davar. Sit here until you know how things fall out. Kilo yishkota ish kim kilo hadavar hayom. For the man will not rest until he has resolved the matter today. Meaning she understood the hint of the 1 meal's worth of barley. She said this is gonna be resolved today, and we just have to hang tight, and this will be resolved. So that brings us to the end of chapter 3, and chapter 4 we'll have to find out what the ultimate resolution is. Okay, thank you for joining.
Thank you, Rabbi.